This is London, not the London of the tour bus and the souvenir stall, not the skyline you photograph from the bridge and scroll past on a screen. This is the city underneath, the one that has been burned to the ground, emptied by plague, abandoned to weeds, bombed from the night sky, and each time, against every reasonable expectation, built again from its own ash. Nearly 2,000 years of it, layered street beneath street, so that the pavement you walk today rests on Victorian brick, and the Victorian brick on medieval timber, and the medieval timber on a red seam of Roman ash that still runs beneath the modern city like a scar that never fully healed. For most of that story, we have only fragments to see it by. A merchant's sketch, a mapmaker's bird's eye view drawn from a church tower, a copper engraving of a burning skyline scratched by a frightened hand in the year the whole city caught fire. Faded, flat, silent. But these drawings were made by people who stood where we cannot, who watched the flames, walked the vanished streets, saw the ships crowd the old river. So we are going to take those original engravings, those paintings and panoramas, exactly as they were drawn, and bring them back to life. Watch the ink turn to breath. Watch the flat lines fill with color and smoke and movement, until the London the artist saw stands in front of you as it truly was. Sit back. We are going to rebuild London. Every fire, every collapse, every resurrection, from the marsh to the metropolis. Let's begin where the city began, with almost nothing at all. The year is 43 AD. 4 Roman legions have crossed the sea and pushed inland through a cold, wet island at the edge of the known world. They need to get their armies across a wide tidal river the locals call the Thames, and they find the one place they can do it, a firm gravel bank at the lowest point the river can be bridged before it spreads into marsh and estuary. There is nothing here, a few huts, mudflats, reed beds, birds. It is useless to almost everyone, but to an empire that thinks in roads and supply lines, it is perfect. They throw a bridge across the water, almost exactly where London Bridge still stands today, and around that crossing, a town appears out of the mud with astonishing speed. They call it Londinium. Within a single generation, it is booming. Ships come up the river on the tide, carrying wine from Gaul, olive oil from Spain, fine pottery, glass, spices. Merchants arrive from across the empire. Gauls, Syrians, North Africans, all crowded into a raw new port town of timber shops and warehouses along the waterfront. In 17 short years, it has become the busiest trading post in the province. And then, in the year 60, it is wiped off the face of the earth. Her name is Boudica, queen of the Iceni, and Rome has pushed her too far, flogged her, brutalized her daughters, seized her people's land. So she raises an army of the furious and marches south, and the towns of Roman Britain burn in front of her. When she reaches Londinium, the Roman governor has already made a cold decision. The town cannot be defended, so it is left to die. Those who can flee, flee. Those who stay are slaughtered. Boudica's army burns Londinium so completely that the destruction is still there in the ground beneath the modern city, a layer of scorched red clay, half a meter thick in places, that archaeologists call the Boudican destruction horizon. Melted glass, charred grain, coins fused together by heat. The very first London ended in fire before it was 20 years old. But the crossing is still there. The river is still there. The reason the town existed has not gone away. And so Rome does what London will spend the next 2,000 years learning to do. It rebuilds, and it rebuilds bigger. A planned city rises from the ash, with a forum and basilica larger than anything else in Britain, public baths, temples, an amphitheater where thousands watch men fight and die. Around the whole city they raise a great defensive wall of ragstone, nearly 3 miles long and 6 meters high, a wall so solid that its line still shapes the streets of the financial district today, and pieces of it still stand after 18 centuries. At its height, Roman London holds perhaps 60,000 people. It is the capital of the province, the largest city in Britannia. And then the empire that made it begins to fail. By the early 5th century, Rome is being torn apart on every frontier, and Britain is too far, too costly, too exhausting to hold. Around the year 410, according to tradition, the message comes from the emperor: look to your own defenses. The soldiers leave. And when the soldiers leave, everything that depended on them leaves too. The trade routes that carried the wine and the oil simply stop. The coins stop coming, and the coins already here lose their meaning. The officials go, the craftsmen go. The great buildings, the basilica, the baths, the mansions with their mosaic floors, are left to a shrinking population that no longer knows how to maintain them. This is the strangest chapter in London's story, because it is the chapter where London almost ceases to exist. Roofs fall in, walls crack and lean, grass and then trees push up through the tessellated floors where senators once dined. Within a couple of generations, a city of tens of thousands is reduced to a scatter of people camping in the ruins of something they can no longer imagine building. For the better part of 200 years, the greatest city in Britain is very nearly a ghost. The Saxons who now settle the land are not city people. They are farmers, and they look at the silent stone shell of Londinium and they are frightened of it. One of their poets, gazing at ruins like these, calls them the work of giants. He cannot conceive that ordinary men made them. So they do not move into the old city. Instead, around the 7th century, they build a new settlement of timber and thatch just to the west, along the riverbank, where the Strand and Covent Garden are today. They call it Londonwick, London's trading town. And slowly, the river works its old magic again. Goods come in from across the North Sea, amber from the Baltic, wine and pottery from the Rhineland, and Londonwick grows into a thriving port of perhaps 8,000 souls, which of course makes it a target. The Vikings come up the Thames like they came up every river in Europe, first to raid, then to conquer. In 842, they sack Londonwick. A few years later they do it again, and this time they come to stay. The open, undefended trading town on the riverbank is simply indefensible. It falls again and again, and the man who finally breaks the pattern is Alfred the Great. In 886, he takes London back from the Danes, and he does something clever, something that will shape the city for the next 1,000 years. He abandons the vulnerable riverside settlement and moves everyone back inside the old Roman walls that everyone else had been too afraid to use. He repairs the ancient ramparts, recuts the ditches, lays out streets. The empty Roman shell becomes a fortress city again, defensible, permanent. London, for the second time, rises inside its own ruins. For the next century and a half, the city passes back and forth between Saxon and Danish kings, growing all the while, until the crisis year that changes everything, 1066. Edward the Confessor, who has built his great abbey at Westminster, just upriver, planting the seed of a second London where kings will be crowned, dies without an heir. England tears itself apart over the succession. Harold is crowned, then marches the length of the country to fight off one invasion, and is still catching his breath when news comes that another army has landed on the south coast. William, Duke of Normandy, has come to take England, and at Hastings, Harold loses it. On Christmas Day, William is crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey. William does not trust London. It is the richest and most powerful place in his new kingdom, and it had supported his enemy, So he raises a fortress to make his message unmistakable. A vast stone keep pressed against the eastern corner of the old Roman wall, 90 feet high, its walls 15 feet thick at the base. The White Tower, the heart of the Tower of London. It begins as a threat, a Norman fist, closed around a conquered city, and it will stand as a symbol of royal power for the next 900 years. A palace, a prison, a treasury, an armory, a place of coronations and of quiet executions. Now medieval London grows in earnest. It is cramped, filthy, noisy, and getting richer by the year. The merchants organize into guilds, the goldsmiths, the mercers, the fishmongers, the drapers, and the guilds grow so powerful that kings must bargain with them. When the barons force King John to seal Magna Carta in 1215, London's support is one of the levers that makes it happen, and the city wins its own reward, the right to elect its own mayor. Across the river, London Bridge is rebuilt in stone, a project so vast it takes 33 years, and it becomes a street in its own right, a crush of houses and shops teetering over the water, with a chapel at its center and the severed heads of traitors displayed on spikes at its southern gate. For more than 600 years, it will be the only bridge across the Thames in London. The city climbs toward 80,000 people, and then the ships come in. In 1348, they arrive at the wharves carrying an ordinary cargo and one extraordinary passenger, a bacterium, riding in the fleas on the backs of the rats in the hold. The Black Death. It moves through the crowded timber lanes faster than anyone can understand, because no one yet understands it at all. Within 18 months, somewhere between a third and a half of everyone in London is dead. The dying comes so fast that the churchyards overflow and great pits are dug in the fields beyond the walls. The bodies laid in rows, whole streets stand silent. A city that had taken 13 centuries to build to 80,000 is halved in a single terrible season. And still it does not end. The survivors inherit a changed city. Fewer hands, so labor is suddenly worth more, and the poor begin, for the first time, to sense their own power. In 1381, that power boils over. Enraged by punishing taxes, an army of peasants and laborers marches on London, and the poor of the city throw open the gates to them. They storm the tower itself, drag out and behead the Archbishop of Canterbury, and burn the palace of the king's own uncle to the ground. The revolt is eventually crushed, its leaders hunted down and executed. But the ruling class has felt the ground move, and it never quite forgets. London has learned that it can burn from below as easily as from without. By 1500, the city has clawed its way back to perhaps 50,000, and then it does something it has never done before. It explodes. By 1600, London holds 200,000 people. By 1650, close to 400,000. It becomes one of the greatest cities in Europe, and the engine of the change is, in part, a king's divorce. When Henry VIII breaks with Rome in the 1530s, to end a marriage, the Pope will not. He seizes the wealth of the church, and in London, the church owned enormous tracts of land. Monasteries and priories are dissolved, and their grounds are carved up, bought by aristocrats and merchants who build grand new houses. Suddenly the city has room to grow, and money pouring in to grow it. Under Elizabeth I, London becomes the beating cultural heart of the age. On the south bank of the river, a wooden playhouse called the Globe opens its doors, and a glover's son from Stratford named Shakespeare is staging Hamlet and Macbeth and Lear for audiences of every rank, groundlings and gentry packed together under the open sky. Out on the river, the wharves grow thick with the ships of a new kind of ambition. The East India Company is founded in 1600, and the first threads of a global empire are being spun from the London docks. But this vast, crowded, brilliant Tudor and Stuart city is built almost entirely of one material: timber. Timber frames, timber floors, roofs of dry thatch, houses leaning so close across the narrow lanes that neighbors can shake hands from upper windows. Open fires in every room, candles everywhere. No fire brigade, no running water to speak of. It is, from end to end, a tinderbox, and in the 1660s, both of London's oldest enemies come for it at once. First, the plague returns. In 1665, it sweeps through the city one last, terrible time. At its height, 7,000 Londoners are dying every week. Red crosses are painted on the doors of the sick, sealing whole families inside to live or die together. The watchmen call through the streets to bring out the dead. Those with money flee to the countryside. The poor have nowhere to go, and it is the poor who die. By the time it burns itself out, perhaps 100,000 people are gone, a quarter of the entire city. And then, in the small hours of the 2nd of September, 1666, in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane, a fire starts. It has been a long, hot, dry summer. A strong east wind is blowing. The fire catches the timber, catches the thatch, catches the pitch-soaked warehouses along the river, and it does not stop. For 4 days and nights, London burns. The flames so vast that people 20 miles away read by their light at midnight and think the end of the world has come. When it is finally halted, the scale of it is almost unimaginable. 80% of the old walled city gone. 13,000 houses, 87 churches, the old St. Paul's Cathedral itself, its stones exploding in the heat, its lead roof running molten down the streets in rivers. 100,000 people are left homeless, camping in the fields around a city that has, for the 4th time in its history, been reduced to ash. And here is the thing that makes London London. Within days of the ashes cooling, men are already drawing the new city. An astronomer and architect named Christopher Wren spreads out a plan for a magnificent capital of wide boulevards and grand open squares. It is too bold. The tangle of who owned what is too complex, the need to rebuild too urgent, and most of the medieval street pattern survives underneath the new. But the city that rises is fundamentally different from the one that burned. New laws forbid the old timber and thatch. London must be rebuilt in brick and stone, wider streets, party walls, a city designed, for the first time, not to burn. And on Ludgate Hill, Wren is given the ruins of St. Paul's, and over 35 years, he raises in their place the greatest dome in England, a cathedral that will come to stand for the city itself, and that will, 3 centuries later, survive a rain of fire from the sky. The 18th century makes London the capital of the world. In the coffee houses, the internet of their day, where news and gossip and money change hands over the cups, whole institutions are born. Lloyd's Coffee House becomes Lloyd's of London, the insurance market. Another becomes the stock exchange. A prime minister takes up residence at number 10 Downing Street. A king buys a house called Buckingham. New bridges finally cross the Thames after 6 centuries in which London Bridge stood alone. And the wealth of a growing empire, from India, from the Caribbean, from the trade in goods and, to our lasting shame, in human beings, flows up the river and into the counting houses of the city. Then comes the steam, and the scale of everything changes again. In 1801, London holds 1 million people. By 1851, 2.5 million. By 1901, 6.5 million. It becomes, without rival, the largest city the world has ever seen, and the Victorians build for it on a scale to match. Trafalgar Square is laid out to a fallen admiral. A new Houses of Parliament rises beside the river when the old one burns, and with it, the great clock tower the world learns to call Big Ben. In Hyde Park in 1851, they raised the Crystal Palace, an impossible cathedral of iron and glass, and 6 million people come to see the industrial might of Britain displayed inside it. Beneath the streets, engineer Joseph Bazalgette builds a system of sewers. After the river grows so foul that in the summer of 1858, the stench shuts down Parliament itself. Sewers so well made that London still uses them today. And in 1863, the world's very first underground railway opens beneath the city. But there are 2 Londons in the Victorian age, and only one of them is glittering. While the rich live in the white terraces of Mayfair and Belgravia, the poor are packed into the rookeries and slums of the East End in a squalor that Charles Dickens spends his life describing. Cholera kills in waves, until a doctor named John Snow proves it rides not in the air, but in the water. In the autumn of 1888, in the fog-choked streets of Whitechapel, a murderer the papers name Jack the Ripper kills and is never caught. And the world reads about it and understands that the greatest city on earth has a darkness at its heart, as deep as its wealth is high. The 20th century brings the fire back one more time, and this time it falls from the sky. Between September 1940 and May 1941, night after night, German bombers come up the line of the Thames and empty their loads onto the city. This is the Blitz. Whole districts are flattened. The docks burn. Tens of thousands of Londoners are killed, and by the war's end, more than 1 million of the city's buildings are damaged or destroyed. And on one of the worst nights of all, as the fire raged around it, a photographer captured the dome of St. Paul's, Wren's dome, the one raised from the ashes of the last great fire, standing whole and defiant above the smoke, refusing to fall. It became the picture of a city that would not be broken. London, for the 5th time, had been given to the flames, and for the 5th time it would rise. Post-war London is exhausted, broke, half in ruins, its empire slipping away. Rationing drags on for years. In 1952, a suffocating fog of coal smoke, the Great Smog, settles on the city and kills thousands in 5 days. And yet, out of the rubble, the city remakes itself once more, and this time it remakes who it is. Ships arrive from the Caribbean, the Windrush generation, followed by waves of new Londoners from India, Pakistan, Africa, from every corner of the old empire and beyond, and they rebuild not just the buildings, but the very idea of what a Londoner is. The 1960s bring a burst of color and music and youth. Later decades bring hard times, decline, the abandoned docks, the bombs of the IRA, and then another resurrection as the derelict docklands rise again as the glass towers of Canary Wharf, and London reinvents itself one more time as a global financial capital. And that brings us, at last, to now. In 2012, the Olympics transform the neglected east of the city. The skyline fills with shapes the Victorians could never have dreamed. The Shard, the Gherkin, glass and steel, standing shoulder to shoulder with Wren's dome and the Norman Tower. More than 300 languages are spoken in its streets. It is crowded, expensive, endlessly argued over, never finished, and it has been exactly that, restless and reinventing, for 2,000 unbroken years. Stand again on that first gravel bank by the river, where 4 Roman soldiers once looked at a marsh and saw a city that wasn't there yet. Everything that has happened since, the burning by Boudica, the long silence after Rome, the Viking raids, the Black Death, the Great Fire, the Blitz, every single time the city was ended, it rose again from its own ashes, taller and stranger and more alive than before. That is not a story about buildings. It is a story about the one thing London has never once run out of, the will to begin again. Thank you for watching, bringing these lost cities back to life, taking the old engravings and the faded paintings and restoring them to breathing, living history. Takes an enormous amount of research and care, and it is, more than anything, a labor of love. If you'd like to see it, hit the like button and subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city you'd like me to rebuild next. As always, I'll see you in the past.